Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This one's going to be my review for The Bad Batch Episode 3, Replacements. Interesting episode. I think an episode of kind of two halves because the stuff with The Bad Batch and Omega, the main group, I thought was not like amazing. It was good. There were some nice moments, a few hints at, stuff that might happen in the future. But in general, pretty light for the third episode. I suppose it's technically the fifth episode, but still. Didn't really accomplish too much. And I think this might be an example of just one of these episodes where, because the Bad Batch, really most of them as characters, are not super fleshed out, and they're not willing to reveal the full, this is what's going on just yet. They're having these rather simple little character arcs. So in this episode, it was basically a Omega prove yourself style moment. What if you are the one left in the situation where you have to save the day? You have to save Hunter. You have to be the one to get the item that will fix the ship back. And so they put her in that position, and her unique approach allowed her to succeed and, show that just pulling the trigger isn't the only way for the Bad Batch to accomplish things. That was nice, definitely, but compared to what the other side of the episode was dealing with, which was the sort of the politics of after the war. How do the Empire deal with Kamino? How do they deal with the clones? How do the Kaminoans deal with the fact that their big contract that has been everything they've been about for years, what do they do now that that's gone? Because I suppose they thought that this was going to be their forever contract, that they would use the clones to supply the military of the Republic, Empire, whatever it is, with clones forever. But now the Empire are looking to kind of back out of that. They don't want to use clones anymore. They don't see the clones as being the future. So at some point, the Empire are going to have to back out of this deal. No more clones. And so the Kaminoans will have to start again. Now, admittedly, this comes down to a little bit of, we don't know exactly how well known the Kaminoans were before this contract for necessarily being a business surrounding cloning, or just that they were a people who happened to be very good at cloning. Again, you have to keep in mind that the knowledge of Kamino was deleted from the Jedi Temple archives, and so to a degree there was an effort to hide it, to protect the plan, the Revenge of the Sith plan. So not everyone knew about it, but some people who were more in the know, like Dex, knew they were cloners. The Kamino is known for having cloners. So the question is obviously if they lose this deal, they might have trouble just advertising themselves again that, we are cloners. And that the other point would be that if the Empire does go against the deal, not want to use clones anymore, is the Empire just going to let them sort of survive? Are they just going to walk away? Thank you for helping us so far. We don't need you anymore. Bye. It's hard to not see, the destroy the facility, kill everyone so no one knows that the Empire was involved in this or anything like that, so that they can't do anything or use any of this against us. Who's to say that's not going to happen? So you can see from the very interesting stuff with like the Prime Minister of Kamino and Lama Su and so on that they're planning. I thought what they were going to do is that, they're planning and they're going to make the rest of the clones loyal to Kamino to set up the sort of fight on Kamino between Empire loyal clones or stormtroopers versus clones or something like that. It seems to know that they're going for like a final effort to try and, keep the Empire as part going along with this deal, and they feel that the way to do that is to make more enhanced clones, so like the Bad Batch. But the question is that, like Lama Su says, they can't do that unless they have one of those clones. So I suppose they technically have access to crosshairs to a degree, but I suppose they're more talking about the likes of, Hunter, Tech, and Wrecker. But I really think they're more talking about Omega, and this is going to get into the details of why Omega is so important. Because they mention the DNA sample they have of Jango Fett is degrading. So they're kind of running out of time for how effective making clones of him is going to be. And I'm guessing that this is where the significance of Omega being named Omega comes from. What her unique skill set is, unique makeup is, she might be suited to be the next template for the clones or something like that. That something about her DNA means that the extra abilities will work better or something like that. That could be quite interesting. So that's why they're looking for some of these other clones. They want to kind of get them back, which has me kind of thinking that, okay, they clearly need the Bad Batch. How are they going to get them? Are the Kaminoans going to hire bounty hunters? If so, who? Is this how Fennec Shan gets introduced into the show? Do they maybe call Boba Fett? You know, there's interesting stuff going on here. Like there's like Cad Bane. We don't know the full situation there. They'd be the three that kind of spring to mind for me in terms of like sending out a group of bounty hunters to try and get the Bad Batch to, you know, help produce more kind of effective clones. That could be some very interesting stuff they have going on in the background, which, you know, might link into the fact that, you know, Fennec Shand is now working for, you know, Boba, as we see here. So bringing them bringing them together earlier when we have a young Boba Fett could be quite interesting. I'm very intrigued to see kind of where they go with that, but I'm thinking that's where they'll do it. They'll have those two cross paths potentially. It comes down to really, you know, how much of a connection does Boba Fett have to Kamino anymore? Does he care? Could be quite interesting. But if you go by the Battlefront games, it was actually the Empire who hired Boba Fett, and I think as part of the Battlefront mission where you do the Kamino loyal clones versus the, you know, Empire loyal clones, Boba Fett is on the Empire side and helps to defeat the kind of the uprising from the Kamino side of things. So, you know, there's a few interesting ways they can go with that. But, you know, I think they're building to something along those lines, because we know clones stop being used at a certain point. Like Kamino, it's not referenced in like anything after a certain point. So what happens? Is it just left off the map? Or, like I'm maybe suggesting here, do the Empire do some work here to get rid of Kamino on the way out? Like kill everyone? That it doesn't look immediately like the most like populous planet. But again, they seem to be more of an aquatic species when they're not in the facilities, so we don't actually know what the full kind of dynamic is. But still, that leaves room to have your major battle there. That you're seeing the conflict develop between the Empire and Kamino. I'm intrigued to see where it goes from here. Because, of course, the main thing that they did on that side of the episode was that they introduced Rampart, who we saw as a hologram last time out, but they properly introduced him here. He introduces Tarkin to the first group of enlisted recruits, his elite squad, basically, who are going to work with a more experienced clone commander to do missions for the Empire. So the first actual, you know, enlisted recruits here, and Crosshairs is put in charge of them. So immediately you can see, okay, there's the plan. There's the plan. It's going to take a while to build it up, but that's what they want to do. Use the time they have left with the clones that they have to train up the others, and then they'll back away from Kamino. That's interesting. How quickly is this going to accelerate? How much time does this give the Kaminoans to kind of fix things or not? And yeah, how far away are we from actually seeing some stormtroopers? That's the big thing here, definitely, because I think we're definitely going to get some sort of thing like that. Even if it is the Bad Batch trying to get Crosshairs back and exploring it that way, we're going to get some conflict, I think, between everything going on here. But yeah, what we got here was Tarkin assigns this new group of, a clone-led unit with enlisted recruits to take out Saw Gerrera's group that the Bad Batch didn't in the previous episodes. So they do that well, but Saw Gerrera wasn't there. They kind of just missed him. So that's kind of an interesting kind of point there, that he does manage to get away somehow. But the people who surrender at the end, Crosshairs is like, yeah, finish the mission. A good soldier follows orders and goes to kill everyone, and orders his unit to wipe everyone out. But the really chatty guy doesn't want to do that, and he gets shot by Crosshairs. So Tarkin ultimately approves of this, and that here is a clone commander who will do everything by the books, follow all the orders, including taking care of the soldiers who don't follow orders. Very interesting, and especially then moving into Crosshairs going into the Bad Batch barracks, looking at Wrecker's markings on the wall, sitting at his bunk. You can see that the Crosshairs who is an active member of the Bad Batch is still there. It's just this inhibitor chip, like they talk about in the other side of the episode. What I felt was some of the most interesting stuff in the, Omega Hunter side of the episode was that Tech again highlights that he's aware of the inhibitor chip. And then Omega, with everything she's saying, highlights that she's completely aware of basically everything. She says that that's the whole point of the chip, is that it's not his fault, that the chip kind of takes over. And so Crosshairs personally wouldn't do this. It's the control from the chips. But while the others are kind of thinking like, oh, does that give us a chance? Hunter is more upset at himself for having to leave Crosshairs behind and not finding a way to maybe bring him with them. So they're not communicating well when it seems like they have enough information here to where they probably could come to the solution I think everyone is expecting them to come to, which is they can get Crosshairs back on their side if they remove his inhibitor chip. Like we've seen, Rex do and Fives do and so on. If you get rid of it, you'll get them back. And it feels like they're seconds away in some of these conversations from figuring that out. And it's just, I suppose, these other dynamics of like the feeling of betrayal within the group, but that they left him behind, kind of, that gets in the way of that. Otherwise, like, it feels like Omega has all the information they need. So I'm interested to see what eventually gets them over to the line to maybe coming up with that sort of a plan. Because again, they're slowly setting up both sides of this, that Crosshairs is not completely gone, the character who was on their side. And they're slowly beginning to realize that the chip is what's forcing Crosshairs to be like he is. And the fact that they're amplifying the power of the chip with the procedure they keep doing on him. That's another factor as well. That it didn't work immediately with Crosshairs. It only sort of half affected him. And now they're amplifying it. So they're really messing with his mind. So it feels like sooner rather than later, they have to come to the conclusion. Are you going to go back for him or not? And, what's going to prompt that to happen? I've suggested already that I think the way that this might happen is that if the Bad Batch come across Rex, Wolf, or Gregor, the three clones and rebels who we know have removed their chips because they survived, of course. I think we know they all removed their chips. If they come across any of them, that would give them the solution that they need of like, oh, take the chip out, Crosshairs comes back. We hope. The question is obviously, how do you get that to happen? What is the situation there? And can Crosshairs have the sort of redemption that we want? Or are they kind of putting themselves into a position where the only way out for Crosshairs is to turn, do the good thing, but die in the process? That way you kind of don't have to deal with the messy aftermath because his noble sacrifice makes up for the turn that did happen. I'm not sure how exactly they go about it. It feels like they're setting the stage for, it could actually be interesting to see him come back on their side and develop because of that. Like, the thing with Crosshairs is that he's just the one who doesn't speak much and is very sort of cold and calculating and sticks to himself. if they got him back on side after a lot of sacrifice, and you know, he has to deal with the fact that he nearly killed members of his own squad and what he did while he was supporting the Empire. If they got him back, there's a character arc for one of your characters who you'd almost set in stone based on his traits as a lone sniper. He suddenly becomes much more interesting in terms of his emotions about the situation. Not to mention the rest of the crew just like dealing with, he's back, we saved him, but how do we deal with him now? How does Omega interact with Crosshairs? Like, I think there's a lot of room to work with if they actually bring Crosshairs back. The question is how quickly they get to this or not. What sort of a situation do you engineer where like the Bad Batch effectively managed to capture Crosshairs, bring him to a medical facility, and get the chip extracted in some way? But also, the other thing is that it almost feels like the way the setup is going so far, him breaking through the chip himself, because they seem to keep having to keep doing the amplify the power of the chip to keep him on side. It feels like more so than the inhibitor chip, being removed, he might actually be able to like become like the other members of his team with his own willpower, which could be interesting by itself. Like if he just on his own separated from the Empire and went to find the team, that could be interesting. Again, I'm just waiting for what the big character arcs with the main Bad Batch characters to jump into play. Because like I said, I'm much more intrigued by a lot of the political stuff going on with the Empire switching from clones to enlisted recruits. Rampart's plan to start to bring them in almost like straight away. Tarkin, what's going on with Tarkin? The kind of sneaky stuff that the Kaminoans now are seeming to be doing. That's what I'm very eager for. I'm almost like, just give me the Kamino setup arc of just politics on Kamino in the aftermath of the war. The Bad Batch can be a great sort of side piece to that, and if it's good, it's good, but this is the thing I'm really interested in. Because, like I said, the other side of the episode was kind of basic, that the ship crashes, they need to put this part in, but an animal steals it. The issue is that the planet has sort of toxic atmosphere, but they have gas masks to go out in. Echo and Tech have to repair the ship as the two Tech people. Wrecker hits his head during the crash, and so is sort of concussed and has to stay on the ship. So either Hunter goes down on his own to get the part back from the animal, or Omega comes with him for backup and to include her as part of the team. So that's what they go for. From there, it basically is Hunter has a fight with the animal. His gas mask is knocked off. He goes unconscious, and while Omega gets the gas mask back on him, he's still unconscious, and it'll take a while for him to wake up. So it forces Omega into a situation where she has to go on her own to try and get the capacitor, I think it was, back for the ship, and confront the animal herself. Now, interestingly, to set up the stage for her big decision at the end, she takes Hunter's blaster with her, suggesting the idea of, like, is she going to become sort of like the other clones and, like, just start using a blaster quite regularly? But no, she ends up actually hesitating in the final moment, not pulling the trigger. But in doing so, she realizes that all this animal cares about is feeding on energy, electricity. It ate all the energy from the capacitor. She has a flashlight with her. Just distract it by throwing the flashlight off to the side. It'll leave the now empty capacitor. She can take that and go, which is exactly what she does. By sort of showing caring, not wanting to hurt other life, she kind of gets the victory in the end here. A kind of very different approach kind of won the day. The other thing they do is that when they get back to the ship, what Wrecker's been doing all this time is that he's basically put together a room on the ship for Omega, a place that she can have to herself, so she's not just sleeping in the corridor, basically. It's a nice moment to show, okay, there's a Wrecker gift to Omega, to, I suppose, make up for the fact that he was about to sort of, eat the food that she had earlier on. Again, she offered it to him, but you know, the Hunter was like, no, let her have her food. That sort of thing. So that was kind of nice. I know some people are maybe reading into the whole, oh, they showed Wrecker like feeling his head quite a bit, and like, is it just the bump that he took and that he is a little bit concussed and he just had to be off this one mission so Omega could do stuff, or is that going to be a setup for later on and that he hit his head, the inhibitor chip is in his head? What if he jolted it like back into life and now Wrecker could be impacted by Order 66 and the controls if he hears the wrong thing? It's something interesting to consider because it was kind of notable that they brought it up like 2-3 times. They show him hitting his head in the crash. Doesn't seem too serious. But then afterwards, he's like, my head, like at least 2 other times. Which is why Hunter says stay behind. So, you know, do you read into it or not? Is it for the simple reason or something more? That's interesting to me. Other than that, like I said, it wasn't that section of the episode with Omega was bad. It was just, you know, the planet didn't have a lot going on. It was very much just a side trip plot. We're on this planet for a second, we deal with this one animal, and we're gone. You know, there's not much to it. Character-wise, like I said, they discuss a few interesting things. Like, they come so close to almost figuring out like how we can get Crosshairs back. But a lot is left unsaid with the idea that Hunter is more dealing with the fact that he left one of his men behind. That's the way he sees it more than anything. He's not really hearing the logic of how the chip works. It's more, as his commander, I left him behind. I shouldn't have done that. And he's feeling guilty about that. So he's going to have to snap out of that to realize there's maybe hope for Crosshairs in the future. On the other side of the episode, like I said, the Kaminoan stuff, Rampart's plan, more Tarkin, and just the very kind of dark, you know, the kind of war crimes kind of stuff that they're going for with what the clones are now being asked to do, and they're just following it along. You're waiting for the big moment. That there's going to be another big moment between Crosshairs and the Bad Batch where maybe he makes the opposite decision. I'm interested to see how they build up to that. Like I said, there is a lot that is interesting going on. They just have to be, I suppose, careful as we go forward about not having too many, I would say, episodes with the main characters like this one. This one worked fine because we're still early on, but with still a good few episodes left, I would prefer we just kind of get to the show with the Bad Batch. Like, what are we actually trying to do here? Are they trying to escape? Are they going to find somewhere to live? Are they hiding Omega? You know, what's the situation? And that's why I want the reveal about Omega to come out, just so we know what we're dealing with here on that side of things. Because that's sort of what's holding things back now, is that once some of the big reveals happen, I think then the characters can begin to take off. So they're my thoughts on this episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.